Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Can't wait to kick off today's week of the Cabral Concept with our Mindset and Motivation Monday. I love today's topic. Oftentimes when I'm scrolling on the weekend mindlessly on Instagram, it's really the only time I get to hang out on Instagram for a little bit. I'm not talking about hours at a time. I'm talking about for 10 to 15 minutes, which I enjoy. I read my messages. So sometimes I'm not always able to see them the same day, but I do check all my messages, and I thank you everybody for your comments, your questions, and just the engagement we have in our community. So thank you so much. But what I'd love to be able to do is also look at what are other people talking about, right? What are people interested in? And what I love to be able to do is understand the psychology behind this. Well, I saw a great quote. I'm a big quotes person, and I often repost that on my social media, especially on Instagram and the stories. And what I saw was basically this concept of learn, earn, and return. And what I wanted to do was, as I start to think about these things and I contemplate them, that's a lot of times what my Sundays are for. Of course, it's all family time all the time, but when we're having some downtime, I love to be able to think about these psychological and philosophical based questions. And so I want to take you through how I looked at it, how I framed this, because I actually did an Ayurvedic podcast years ago on this same time frame. And they basically look at it though as in terms of the physiology of the body. Well, this one now is based more on the psychology, and I love that. So this goes to, we'll call it the first 30 years of your life. That's how I'm framing it. The second phase is the next 30 years, and the third phase, the last 30 years, because I believe that if you're listening to this show, you can make it at least to a healthy 90 years old. So we're going to frame this in terms of 30-year segments. If you want to do average life expectancy, you could do it in terms of 25, 25, and 25. But I think a much more realistic is 30, 30, and 30. So let's get right into it. It's the first 30 years of your life. It's from age 0, right when you're born, until about 29, 30 years old. And I actually think that this holds up really well. This is the learning stage of your life. This is not meant to be the wisdom stage. But the problem is, when we're like 16 years old, 17 years old, 18 years old, I can't speak for everybody, but I can certainly speak for myself, and at least a large majority of others, is that there's oftentimes a lot of more confidence than we should really have. There's sometimes a little bit of bravado, and this is not a bad thing. This is actually needed to happen. It allows children, right? Because when you're a teenager, you're still a child. It allows them to literally leave home, to go out on their own for the very first time, to go live on their own or to go to college, university, etc. It also gives them enough confidence to at least go and start a new job. Literally, they've never had a job before, or at least not a full-time big job, and now they're out doing that. So this confidence is absolutely needed. But we also know that the brain isn't even fully formed in terms of its psychological profile until about 25 years old. So here we are, having undergrads from 18 years old or 17 years old to about 22 years old deciding their future in terms of career. It's pretty wild. I don't like to put that pressure on 17, 18-year-olds needing to choose their major within a year or two. So my recommendation is that we don't do that necessarily at school. I think a broad education is very, very important. And then of course you can major. So I think, again, studying all things, which is how I looked at my own background, and then being able to specify is pretty fantastic. So then after that, you can obviously do internships, you can do jobs to learn more on the job. But anyway, this is a big thing. I mean, we send 18-year-olds off into the military, right? So it's a very strong mindset that you have that you can somehow, you think you're ready to hit the world at 18. So there's confidence. Sometimes there's bravado. There at least is an openness to experimentation, an open mind, and a willingness. There's also typically energy at that age. This is a good thing, because what do we need you to do for those first 30 years of your life? Well, get your education. That can be on the job or in school, however you like to do it. I'm actually not pushing my daughters to go to college or university. If they choose to, great. If not, they can get an education however they want. The world is dramatically changing. AI is dramatically changing things. And, sitting in a classroom for 4 years, if they choose it's not the right path for them, I'm okay with that. Well, at our company, I've hired hundreds of people. We don't look at what university you went to. We look at your experience. We look at overall personality. We look at acumen, how you're going to fit with the team, how you think. That's the most important to us. But anyway, I digress. But the first 30 years, that's really what it's all about. And this should be a time of trying multiple jobs, of meeting all sorts of new people, of travel. I even know that, I kind of have my life before I got well and my life after I got well. But right after I got well, my 27 years old, 28 years old, when I started to do my internships, I traveled overseas. And that went right to like 30 years old or so, and 31. But it was really important for me. And the reason is that I actually got to see, I didn't go to Paris, right? I was in some really tough sections of the world, in Sri Lanka and India, in Beijing. And so, I got to see some real poverty and some real things in life. I experienced hard travel. And obviously I took some great vacations as well with my wife, and we did some great things. So being able to do that while you're younger gives you more than school can just teach alone as well. So using those first 30 years for opening your mind, experimenting with new, safe, things, of course, in life, of travel, of speaking to different people, meeting different people, trying different jobs, going to seminars, just learning as much as you can from as many people as you can. I always say I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't work as a personal trainer, nutritionist, certified strength and conditioning specialist since 18 years old. I wouldn't. Here's why. My clients taught me so much. Now, you learn a lot from your parents. There's no doubt about it. But my clients were all of these people that I had never met before. And I was commuting an hour and a half to get there from Providence, Rhode Island to Boston before I could, afford to live in Boston. And they had all different types of jobs. They were successful, whether it was a, head of a school or it was someone who owned their own business. And I asked questions and I learned. And I also said, wow, love what they're doing there. This is not really working for them here, or they seem to have great habits here. What is the discipline they use? Why don't they have the discipline here? So it's like I started to look at all of these things because I was studying psychology and studying obviously health at the same time. And so it just taught me so much. So getting around all sorts of different groups of people is quite helpful. So 0 to 30, you're learning. That is a time of basically experimenting and understanding what you don't know. Don't have all the answers until that age. Now, as we start to get to later 20s and definitely by 30, oftentimes people start to have a family. What happens when you have kids and a family? Well, usually you're playing it a little bit safer. You're trying to earn a little bit more income. Maybe you're trying to buy a home. Maybe you are trying to save up for your child to go to school, like whatever it might be. There's all sorts of, but no matter what, there's increased expenses. And let's say that your spouse decides to stay home with the child. So now you need to make sure that you've got a good job, that you're able to pay for life, all of these things. But what's that lend to? Typically, you're a little slower to transition to a new job. You're a little bit more cautious in what you are doing, maybe for your travel or any one of these things. It just becomes a little bit less. So there's less learning during that period. Now, should there be? No. But again, I want to be realistic. And that's why I love this lineage over these 90 years is that there is a line. Now, is it for 30 years old for everyone? No. Mine started when my first child was at 34 years old. My wife and I purposely decided to have kids a little bit later. And the reason is that we were both starting and kind of building up our careers. We wanted to do travel and all sorts of different things, but also, and more than anything, it wasn't about that. It was that I wanted to be better as a human in both body and mind so that I could be more sound and grounded when I had children. And I'm glad that I waited. Now, some people are there 10 years earlier. I wasn't. And so I decided to make that conscious decision. And I'm very happy that it did. For me, it worked out well. Kind of have to know yourself. I knew myself. I knew that I had to get better. And I got better, right? Still getting better to this day, but I got better. So here's the thing. If you are thinking about travel, it might take a little bit more planning. You could still do it with young kids. We traveled with our kids and it was totally fine. And they started to go all over between the ages of like 2 and 4 years old, right? We traveled all over the place. We traveled to Hawaii with them. We traveled on a long flight to Australia with them. We went to Germany because they go to my seminars and medical conferences together. So again, not everyone's going to do this, but it can still happen, right? It can still happen. And even though your kids won't remember it, it is shaping the way that they think and this all becomes normal to them. The other thing is, let's say one of two in a relationship, right, decides like, hey, I don't love my job. I know many people that were attorneys. They're like, I don't want to be an attorney anymore. Can't do it, right? So what do? Well, they went into real estate. They went into health coaching. They went into teaching. They went into something else that they were more passionate about. They went back to school, or they transitioned job-wise. They talked with their partner. Listen, I need 6 months, a year, 18 months to go back to school, to do the certification, do whatever. And they didn't have kids or whatever. And the other person supported them during that time. And that's really nice between partners. And my wife's always supported me, over my career. I started over 4 times, always in the same field. But I moved from Providence to Boston. I then opened my first location, and then I opened my second location, and then I went virtual every time, basically starting from scratch, essentially. And my wife, she had 2 different jobs, totally related fields. And one of them, again, if you know real estate, it takes you like a year to get going, to build yourself up. And so she was able to do that as well. So really being able to support your partner as much as you can, that's basically in your 30s, maybe even your 40s. And then after that, someone said this to me many, many years ago, and again, when you're nowhere near 50, you're like 50 years old. That's just like, that's so far away. 50 comes fast. And so once you get to 50 though, you've got all this experience. You graduated from undergrad 25 years ago. You've got 25 years of life experience by the time you get to about 47 years old, right? And so now you've got a lot to offer to the world. I mean, you really do. And so if you look at it, for your children, you've got a lot of experience. For friends, for nonprofits, for volunteering, for your church, for your work, you've got just a lot of life experience. True wisdom yet? Not quite. But you've got a lot of real world experience. And it's not double what you had when you were, call it, 22 years old. It's 10x, 20x. Who can even count? 100x. Because you've just been in the real world, right? Different. When you're 22, you haven't even been yet really in the real world. Most likely you're graduating from undergrad, the vast majority, at least in the US. And so it's radically different. So there's just so much you have to offer, and you've made so many mistakes, and you've learned hopefully from those mistakes. So now your growth every year is exponential. It really is. I see that like, oh, I've seen this before. I've seen this before. And like, even with clients, I'm like, I've done, myself personally, I've done over 40,000 one-on-one appointments, right? So it's like, this is not new. I've seen most things before. And that's why I love it as well. Like, I can just see the things quickly, but I don't close my mind. I want to continue to listen, continue to understand, look for things that you may not be seeing right now. Like, that's what I look at. And our team has done over now 300,000 appointments. So like, there's just a lot of data. Now, could I have rushed that process? No, you can't rush the process, right? And I always talk about the 10,000 hours of mastery. Think about that. At 50, 40-hour weeks, it takes 5 years to get to 10,000 hours. So no matter what field you're in, that's what it is. It's 5 years. It really is. So that's how I look at that. And what I'm saying is, you might not be able to experiment with as much, as you're getting into your 40s and 50s, but you have far more experience and knowledge. And so the decisions you do decide to make, even if they're bigger life decisions, like moving, my wife and I moved a couple of years back, big decision, but we based it off where we know we want to be going. And we didn't really know where we wanted to be going in the world, in our 20s. So there's a lot to that in terms of family and work and your overall self-care, right? So I'm doing things right now with my own self-care that I think are going to be smart decisions 30, 40, 50 years from now. Because if I was only living for today, I would do things that aren't necessarily as healthy for 30 years from now. All right. Then the last phase, that last 30 years, is 60 to 90 years old. This is a little bit different. And this is what I gather from working with many of my clients, 60 to 90 years old and beyond, is that you're a little less interested in overall experimentation or starting from scratch. It's not of much interest to you. And it's sometimes because you just don't have the same desire. It's not the same wild, young energy of youth that you had at 18 years old or 20 years old or 22 years old or 25 years old, right? You're 60, 70, 80 years old now. And your primary focus is also different. You're not necessarily looking to start a new business, although you might be. Like, it's more of a maybe enjoyable, business. And I would say even during your 30 to 60, people aren't looking to take as many risks, but you could moonlight. You could do, your regular job during the day and a couple hours at night, learning getting a certification or learning what you need to do and moving into a different field. You can absolutely do that. Well, 60 to 90, oftentimes, again, this isn't for everyone, but I'm just saying some. I know plenty of people who work well into their 80s, without a doubt. Less interested that I've seen in experimentation, not wanting to start from scratch like a new thing. Now, learning a new language, playing an instrument, taking up dancing, like I've seen that over and over. So that's a great thing, right? But friendships and family often now take precedence. So what that means is that if you're trying to decide where you're going to allocate your time, and oftentimes you have a little bit more time, it's, all right, where's my family at this weekend? Or what are they doing this week? Am I going to visit a child at college? Or have they graduated? Do they have a family? Am I now a grandparent? Am I looking now to visit my grandkids more often? What do they have going on at school? Do I want to see that? So it's those types of things. Also, gathering of friends. If you're retired or you have more time, you might be playing golf, tennis, pickleball. Those relationships become far more of an interest because you've gone through, the first 60 years. You've gone through those first 2 life cycles. And also now people, they want to travel, but it's a little bit different. They maybe have a little bit more income or disposable income, and they now are doing it for enrichment based. It's a little bit different. No longer staying inside of hostels and backpacking through Europe, right? It might be taking their time, being able to really take in the culture, sitting at cafes, really immersing yourself in it a little bit different. And then one of the biggest ones is now by the ages of 60 to 90, you've actually accumulated wisdom. At 16, 17, 18 years old, you think you're wise. You're not wise. You're just 16, 17, 18 years old. That's not discredited. I was there myself. You have learned a lot, right? Schooling wise. You might actually be smarter in terms of your calculus and all sorts of different things, having been at like that pinnacle at 18, studying for the SATs, all those things, than if a 55-year-old and sat down to do calculus again or whatever, right? But the truth is it's just different. That is school-based memorization versus wisdom, which is really the understanding of what life's all about. And I think it was a couple Mondays ago on episode 3342 that I actually went through the top regrets at the end of life. And if you know what those regrets are ahead of time for people, and you begin to work backwards, you can go towards the end of your life and say, I have no regrets. Life was amazing. I was blessed with this time here. I got to learn a lot. I got to earn, which is not just income, but it's also in terms of your personal legacy, family, work, nonprofits. It's earning your reputation. It's earning what life has to offer. And then the last is the return. It's giving back. And that is sharing your wisdom because it's true wisdom. You've lived life now and you know what life is really all about. And you wish that maybe you could go back and replay some certain things, but that's not necessarily the goal. It's like that for everyone. The goal is you can do what you can do in your time with the knowledge you have at the time. So your goal in 60 to 90 is actually to share that wisdom with the younger generation. Will they listen right away? Maybe, maybe not. But if you say it enough, they'll have it in the back of their mind and it will start to creep up. It will start to pop up. So although you're not pushing your wisdom on anyone, trust me, it is something that's not meant to be kept, but rather shared and returned back to the future generations. Thank you so much for tuning into today's show. Hopefully this was helpful. I just like to recalibrate every once in a while. I'm in that 30 to 60 zone. I'm already trying to think about, okay, this will be the 60 to 90. What do I have left that I want to accomplish? What do I want to be able to earn? Not in terms of just income, but actually in terms of earning maybe my wisdom years of 60 to 90. I still have a lot more to learn. I've got a lot more to live. And I really look forward to each phase, and I hope you do as well. Thanks so much. Take care, everybody. And again, if you want to share the show, it's at stephencabral.com/3356. Take care. Thanks so much for tuning into today's show. Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I want to make sure that you're getting our daily content, not missing out on anything. Functional medicine, wellness, weight gain, weight loss, anti-aging, living longer, stronger, and all of the most cutting-edge research. And if there's any topics you want to hear, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Take care.